Hello and thanks for stopping by. This is Millipede for the NES, released in 1988 by HAL America, and I'm playing this game off of a cartridge on a retro USB AVS. Overall, I think this is a reasonable port of the arcade version. Millipede falls into that arcade category of games where you really just have a game that's fundamentally simple in terms of task, and your job is to play, looking to get as high a score as possible. High score in an arcade game usually means being able to write your name on the high scoreboard. But for the NES, I imagine it's just going to be you doing better than who you might be playing against. This style of game is fun from time to time for certain. It's straightforward, and you should be able to understand what's going on pretty fast. Here, you just shoot stuff. Over time, as home consoles have evolved in complexity, task, and difficulty, I think this type of game stands out differently than others. If you're shopping for a new game at a store and you're looking at a Mass Effect game next to a Pac-Man game, I think it's fair to assume that most people would consider these games to be pretty much of totally different calibers. I know I do. When you pick one over the other, you're looking for a very specific type of experience. When I was younger and NES was the thing, everyone pretty much had, or at least everyone I knew, had a few of these arcade-style ports in their collection. I always found them best to play with friends to challenge each other for a high score. I find games like this tend to take a lot of direct focus, and they can be over fairly quick if you're not careful. How many times would you restart a game like this before you got bored, frustrated, or just moved on to something else entirely? When you play with friends, I think it's maybe a little easier to pass it back and forth and stay engaged. So, this is Millipede, the sequel to Centipede. It's the same game, of course, with some differences. There are some different bugs, the Millipede moves faster, there are DDT bombs that you can shoot in the middle of the level, but overall, these games are close enough where you could possibly get them confused. At its core, it's just a simple one-screen shooter. You shoot upwards, and you dodge around, dodging bugs and trying to kill the Millipede, and pretty much anything else that moves. Millipede is a fairly basic story if you care to pay attention to the story here. You're an elf in an enchanted forest, and you are shooting a giant Millipede and other creepy crawlies with magic arrows. Okay, that's pretty much it. There are obstacles in the forest, of course, mostly mushrooms, which you can destroy after a few shots, and that will help open up the playing field. Eventually, plants show up that you can't destroy, just to add some difficulty, I guess. When you shoot a piece of the Millipede, that piece will transform into a mushroom, thereby cluttering the playing field just a little bit. The Millipede will appear at the top of the screen, and it will move back and forth, moving down one row at a time basically as it progresses. But if it runs into an obstacle like a mushroom, it will be redirected immediately and then it will drop a level right there. As you would imagine, as the playing field gets more and more cluttered, the Millipede will start to descend much faster. For this game, I am grateful that you can hold down the trigger and it will auto-fire. I can't imagine what this game would be like if you didn't have this ability. The sounds are there, certainly. I mean, it's been a while since I've played this on an arcade console, but listening to the gameplay sounds here, they seem fairly accurate here, or at least as accurate as I can remember. Especially when those little creepy noises that are made when the spider jumps out on screen, which is pretty much all the time. I totally feel like this is the Millipede I would expect to hear in the arcade. I suppose overall this is a pretty good port, but it's the little things that confuse me here. We only have a 4x3 screen to start with, and this game chose to not utilize all the space on the screen, and it instead leaves left and right areas basically unused by the game. I know it feels kind of narrow when you're playing in the arcade, but the NES version has more real estate to deal with on screen. I don't know why you wouldn't want to utilize this. There's an opportunity to make this game better. Why would you not try to take advantage of that? Maybe create just a slightly larger playing field for the game. That would have been great. Okay, if you did decide you had to keep the ratio, and you needed to keep the play field the same scope, at least put it in the dead center of the screen. Here it's off to the left. We have space on both sides of the game area, and they're not of the same size. What did they do here with the space they did have? Well, I think it's kind of wasted. What do we get here? We get this awful looking green brick pattern, uneven on both sides. What a waste of an opportunity. In the arcade, they had this really nice artwork on the side of the cabinet itself. There was this giant Millipede, and there was a guy in a red costume with a bow and arrow at the bottom. Not to be confused with the Centipede cabinet artwork, which was also great. Go look them up. They're both pretty great. Now we have to stare at this terrible green brick forever, and I am not a fan. If you just left the screen black, I probably wouldn't have cared so much, but now I've got to stare at this terrible green. The gameplay is great for sure. It's just like the arcade, but I just hate seeing missed opportunities like this. A small adjustment to a color or a pattern would have gone a really long way here. This game is about you spending time with it and just grinding hour after hour. If I'm going to have to do that for such a long period of time, which is what they want, at least try to make it not monotonous in some capacity. Well, that's all I have for Millipede today for the NES. Thanks for giving this one a look, and I'll catch you on the next video.